Time now to get into the sentiments driving media analytics this week and the social and corporate trends of the week on social media. Joining me in studio to tell us more is Melanie Malherbe, who is the head of client engagement at BrandsEye, and joins me now as we talk about the media highlights within the media fraternity. But first, tell us who BrandsEye is and what exactly you do.
So BrandsEye is a technology company. We provide media analytics platforms and services to our clients, and in essence what that means is we listen to conversations on social platforms, online platforms, print, broadcast, and we measure the impact of those conversations, and then also get behind the sentiment and how people feel about a brand, a topic, or a product for that matter, and why they feel that. And then we provide those insights to our clients.
Fantastic. Talk to us then about the theme that we're focusing on today.
Yeah, so today we're focusing on the banking industry, and we're looking at the volume of conversation and the sentiment related to those conversations over the past 5 months. So I've brought with me a quick graph on those 3 metrics. As you can see by what's hopefully coming up shortly is that there is a negative curve on this graph and a positive one as well. And from the banking industry as a whole actually has a lot of negative sentiment towards it. It's seen as a negative industry as a whole, or perceived as it.
And that's the graph that you're referring to, right?
That is the graph that I was referring to. Coming up now is there's 4 banks that we're looking at here, and if you look at Capitec, it's got quite a positive slant to it, and it's seen as probably the most loved bank.
Is that the red line or the
country.
blue line?
The blue line is the positive on that end. The one that's not shown on that graph is actually Standard Bank, and our data shows us that Standard Bank has the most, or has had the most negative sentiment towards them in the past 5 months.
What are the reasons for that though, Melanie?
They've actually had 2 big PR crises to deal with in the past 5 months, which is never easy to do, and those type of things always actually affect the sentiment coming their way. So I've brought their graph as well just to show what their picture looks like. And you will see that they had quite a big spike in volume in January of this year. And then right at the end, there's another quick volume spike. And that was related to actually, the first one was related to Chris Hart making what was perceived to be a racist tweet back then. What was coming up there was actually how the share price was affected. And we've seen so many PR crises affect share prices.
Wow.
So the previous one that came up there was related to the Japanese ATM scam. And that was the most recent volume spike that came up in their conversation, the most recent PR crisis they had to deal with. And you would think that something like money and losing over 300 million rands worth of money in that period, and the security of their money being affected, people would actually get in quite an uproar about something like that. But it didn't touch the share price at all. It just kind of went on its same curve. What did, however, show a bit of a tweak in share price was the Chris Hart conversation that happened in the beginning of
On
June.
that, one would probably think that it might have changed slightly, because I do understand Chris Hart was suspended, not so?
Yes, he was. So a lot of the conversation was in the beginning around his tweets and it being racist and people not liking that, obviously. And then the conversation completely shifted focus from him onto Standard Bank and the way they were handling it. People kind of wanted a more immediate action. They wanted him almost fired straight away, and why weren't they looking into it? So in between the period that he was suspended and the investigation was launched, actually the conversation spiked the most. There was about 15,000 mentions coming in at that time, and it was more directed at Standard Bank than it was at Chris Hart. Actually, at that time, which was, quite interesting to see. So it's interesting to see how something can start off as one person saying something, and then all of a sudden the shift goes from this one person and what they said to how a company handled that, and that often affects the sentiment towards that company.
So true.
Yeah.
Well, time now for us to get into the trend tracker of the week. Now, Melanie, I understand there are concerns here around potential US terror attacks. How significant is this?
It started trending on Monday and Tuesday. About 5,000 mentions coming up around the US terror alerts. And it was interesting to see how the conversation shifted from being quite serious and people going, oh, this is happening, it's quite, it's serious. And then the conversation started from your typical conspiracy theorists who started putting their ideas out there, and then started asking, what is the US's involvement in this? Did they, are they causing it? It's their fault, and things like that. And then I think typically South African, the humor kicked in. And it seems to happen a lot these days that Nkandla gets brought into the picture. There was one specific tweet from a gentleman who asked the terrorists to please focus on our biggest shopping mall in KZN called Nkandla.
Oh, goodness.
And that went viral. He only has about 102 followers, but that tweet just went, and everyone saw it, and everyone reshared it and retweeted it. And that actually sparked something in our analysts' minds as to this whole Nkandla thing. And it was very interesting to see that Nkandla in the past week had the exact same amount of mentions that the US terror alerts had. Around 5,000 mentions where people make use of the word Nkandla. A lot of it was driven by the DA's Facebook and Twitter pages. President Zuma was blamed for the Japanese ATM scam because he wanted to use that money to pay back the money. There was thoughts that both the president and Nkandla was the reason for the possible downgrade. There were mentions about Cooley Roberts looking for Mr. Right, and people saying she should look at the president. He'll buy her a car and build her in Nkandla. So it
potential blesser there, huh?
So it seems that Nkandla is the thing that South Africans go to these days to hold on to and make a joke about, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but
it's something so serious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Typical South African format, like you say, our sense of humor, which never seems to disappoint.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today, Melanie. Malherbe or Malherbe?
It's the Afrikaans version, Malherbe.
Malherbe. Oh, pardon, my Afrikaans is niet so ordentlik nie, maar jammer vir die, I forgot what a mistake is now. But anyway, pardon the mistake there. Thank you so much for your time. Melanie Malherbe, who is the Head of Client Engagement at BrandsEye.